YouTube, Awesome Writer here, and I know what you're thinking. Another MMPR video. But this is not, I want to be clear, not a rant. It's not a secret rant video where it's an asterisk, and I'm going to reveal it's the new rant video, the new Rant Avengers video. No, because I already did my final MMPR rant about the constant MMPR complaining. I will bring up a couple of points that are brought up by the complainers, not to rant, but just to bring up context of what I'm going to be talking about. But of course, the MMPR discourse has reared its ugly head again in the wake of the Ninja Kids little web series thingy where we're using MMPR. But of course we're using it for that. And it got me thinking about a couple things, because it starts the discourse of, you know, how can we not move past this? It's almost like it's a disastrous strategy. And that's like a whole conversation I've had many times. Like, I can see it both ways, where it is a disastrous strategy, but it's also not. It got me thinking about two things. Number one, something I talked about a long time ago. I did at least one video, if not two, talking about how Power Rangers' problem with this is they failed to create multiple iconic eras, like other franchises, which I got pushed back on two fronts, because of course you have everyone and their mother telling me what season they grew up with, as if that, you know, means anything to the general public. But yeah, there has been moments, like I think Samurai is the biggest one I always bring up, and I wouldn't say it's impossible that you could have created something out of that. I think they missed the boat. I don't even think it's necessarily impossible now to maybe do something with like Samurai, but I can see why they think it's a bigger risk, and we just need to let that go, because everybody that's worked on Power Rangers in the last few years has seen it as a lesser and risky brand, so I totally see why they're going for this. And it got me thinking about, you know, the fans always can't see why they do that, why they see things disastrous, but what we're doing with MMPR is kind of the norm for all other franchises here. That's something I talked about in other videos, and that got me to realize that even when I made the video about failing to create multiple iconic eras, because the other point people brought to me was, you know, I brought up Transformers and Turtles that created multiple iconic eras. Like, of course you have the 80s and G1 that are the most pop culturally iconic, but they did create more significant eras than Power Rangers did. And people brought up that's different though, because they're using the same characters, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel every few years. And that is very true. And these 2 points made me realize that I think that the fandom views MMPR as different, especially the hardcore fans, because they're so used to it being normal doing the anthological approach, especially when they get into Toku, and they all only interact in their Toku bubble and think, this is the norm, why isn't everyone else doing this? And it's because here in the US, and, you know, other places, it's not as easy to get an anthological thing going. Like, the only things I can think off the top of my head that are anthology series that we have here are like True Detective and American Horror Story. I know there's others, but I can't think of very many where it's a full-on anthology, like Sentai, where you have a new cast and all that every year. You know, we even have problems in the comics sometimes, and extending to the movies of people wanting to accept a new person under the mantle of Captain America or Iron Man or Superman or whatever. And it always ends up going back to the original. And that's the whole thing. That is the mentality here that does frustrate me in the West, more so with brands at large than with MMPR. Not about them using the original brands, but the contradictory discourse that's plagued fandoms for decades, which is, you're only ever going back to nostalgia, no new ideas. We see that now constantly, people whining about them bringing back the X-Men characters and Spider-Man. It's like, by the way, they're not going to be able to do that forever, so I don't know why people complain about that. In comics, you can bring back Wolverine for 100 years, but I think it's great we're doing this for Doomsday and Secret Wars, because who knows when we'll ever be able to get the MCU cast, the X-Men cast, and the old Spider-Man together. Anyway, that was a mini rant, but that's not an MMPR rant. Regardless, people complain about that, like, why do you always go back to the originals, like at the MMPR? But then the second Star Wars, Marvel, Turtles, Power Rangers does anything new, they're like, no, that's not right, it's not like the original, it's not like the source material. So it's like, what do you want? You're like, new ideas are fine, but they're also illegal. My point with this isn't just an MMPR problem, it's a franchise problem, because that's what sells, is people have an attachment to that first iteration. Now the thing with that is I think that MMPR, like I mentioned in the video the other day, if we're going to do this, now let's set aside the reboot for a second, because who knows how that goes? Maybe the odds are in its favor. The odds are forever in its favor. It joins the Hunger Games. But maybe it does well, and it creates its own new iconic generation and team. But let's set that aside for a second, and just talk about, if we're going to go all in on MMPR, let's go all in, but do it like Turtles and Transformers, where instead of just using the exact same iconography of only Season 1, first of all, take advantage of the other 2 seasons. You got a White Ranger, you got cool Thunderzords. You know, the White Ranger is in the movie. I don't think you're taking a huge risk if you bring in ninja stuff from Season 3, because ninjas do well with kids. So use that stuff, you know. But also, what we see here with this Ninja Kid suits. Obviously, this is a small potatoes thing, but this is what I'm talking about. You take the suits, you redesign them. This is like a more minimal redesign in the sense that it's not wholly unrecognizable like the 2017 ones. Like 2017 Red is the only one that has a helmet that echoes the original. But you know what I mean. Every few years, redesign the suits, redesign the Zords, be willing to take stuff from other seasons. Like, what if you did a season where you had White Ranger Leader and no Red that season, and Red the 6th or something? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, do it like what Turtles does and Transformers does, is every few years for new generation, it's still MMPR, you get that recognizability, the iconography, but it's redesigned and reimagined for a new generation, be it animated, live action, or what have you. Because I think that makes PR feel more stale than a lot of the other brands that use the nostalgia, because theirs are always just season 1. It's always just season 1. Like, they're afraid to even go to season 2. Like, even with the Turtles crossover comics that I love, like, they won't go into season 2 stuff, or 3. Like, guys, we cannot let the Earth die without doing a Turtles crossover with the season 3. They're ninjas! It's right there! For fork's sake, man! It drives me crazy. But anyway, like, that's the thing, is because the other seasons, shows, like Transformers, Turtles, they always have G1 around. You're always going to get your retro Optimus G1 figure, the 4K re-release, whatever, of the series. You're always going to have the 80s Turtles around, bringing back nostalgia from the 90s movies as well. But then they're going to have your Rise of the TMNT. You're going to have your Transformers Animated, your Transformers Prime. Unfortunately, Transformers 1 didn't do very well, even though it was fantastic. Say that again? But anyway, like, you have that, but that's what MMPR needs, because that core Season 1 iconography is always going to be around. You're always going to find the shirt at Hot Topic. They're going to bring skins into a game for it or whatever, do remasters, all that's toys, retro toys. They're always going to be around. But if you keep reiterating on it, at least it's bringing something new, so it doesn't feel so stale, because at least when you're going back to it, you're reinventing it a little bit, and also take advantage of some of the other characters. Like, I'd be curious if you could do, for the generations that aren't our generation that grew up with it, if you could do MMPR with just totally new characters. That might do okay, because I think for the generations after the ones that grew up with it and the characters were so important to them, it's more about the recognizability of those suits and Zords. Like, I think Tommy's maybe the only one. Tommy and Jason, I guess, that are multiple generations, but I feel like you could do that. But also, you could do an animated reimagining that had Kimberly, Billy, Aisha, Adam, and Jason. Like, do something like that. Like, you have 3 full seasons. Use everything from it, come up with new stuff like the comics, and reimagine it. I think that's what I would like to see in regards to us using MMPR. That's not what I would love for it. I would love to live in an ideal world where we could do more anthological stuff, although Power Rangers version of it, where what I love about Power Rangers over Sentai is the at least better attempt at an interconnected world, especially when you have stuff like Gojuger on there that, like, in terms of continuity, is just everything I hate about it. But I would love to live in the world that people talk about here, where they're like, I wish we could have other season spotlight. I'm like, I agree, but I understand why it's not happening. I would love to live in that world, and I'd love to live in a world where the reboot takes off. I hope the best for this reboot, or the next reboot after this one fails. But in terms of using MMPR, I think the problem is we need to change the way we use it. Instead of just going back to that core Season 1 aesthetic, give us something new. Like, how much more exciting would it be if Reignition was a live-action series like with these Toku J suits, or an animated series that the suits still looked the same, but they were slightly differently designed to look like a new generation, have different Zords. Like, it would be so much more exciting to walk down Walmart's aisle and see toys that were a Neo version of MMPR rather than just back to Season 1 again. But anyways, guys, that's just my piece. Let me know what you think in the comments as always. Till next time, Dawson Ryder, signing out.